This week, week 7, the last 2 weeks of the R Workflow workshops. And these 2 sessions are going to be on R Markdown, and specifically on the use of R Markdown for reports. Go down here, find the links to the lectures here. I'll post that link in the chat. There's a lot of online resources for learning R Markdown. I'm going to focus not really on R Markdown itself. I give kind of an orientation in RStudio just to get you going. But I'm going to focus really on some aspects of R Markdown that we use a lot for, when we're creating reports. And these aspects aren't covered as much in the documentation. A few logistics as usual. Please post your questions in the chat and I'll try to follow along there, but it's a little hard to lecture and follow that. And I encourage anyone on the chat to help each other out, post links, answer questions. If you have a question, usually the group's pretty big, a little bit too big for to handle live questions during the lecture, but once I finish the lecture, it's about 45, 50 minutes, then go ahead and you raise your hand and I'll allow you to unmute. But feel free to just throw things into the chat just during the lecture whenever, and just everyone sort of jump in there and help each other out. Okay, so R Markdown, just a basic overview. What is it? So R Markdown is a way that you can combine text and R code together in a document and create a document where you run that document and it takes the text, creates whatever format output you want. And so it could be, HTML, could be a Word document. I think you could do, PowerPoint or various presentation formats. There's a lot of different formats you can output it. Takes that text and then it runs the R code and uses that R code output and includes that in the document too. So for example, you might write some R code to generate a figure, say. It's going to include that figure in your document. And this allows us to kind of automate our, just a second, the dog. Can you move her out? Sorry about that. Border Collie wants to go for a walk. Okay, so this allows you to create something where you're not like one-off creating the figures and the tables. You can have it pull in the data, create the figures, and sort of like run it all. So every time, say, your data change, you don't have to go in there and recreate your figures. You just rerun the code and say make report, and it recreates the report. This is obviously a really huge benefit for us when we are creating the types of reports that we generate within agencies, government agencies. I mean, a lot of times we are creating a document or a report that has the same format, but we need it for different areas or different data sets or different species or different gears. There's lots of examples. At the bottom here, when I get to this part of the lecture, I'll show you some real world examples of how we have done this within NOAA fisheries. Before I jump in to talking about R Markdown, I want to just say something about Quarto. You might have heard about that. If you haven't heard about it, you will if you use R Markdown. So Quarto is also created by RStudio, and it's basically the next generation of R Markdown. Eventually, we'll all be using Quarto because I don't think our studio will have a reason to have both R Markdown and Quarto, since kind of they do the same thing. Quarto is back compatible with R Markdown. So when you're starting out, just stick with R Markdown, you just use that in our studio. There's lots of examples out there. Going forward, eventually you will be using Quarto, but since it's back compatible, it doesn't really matter right now which one you use. Quarto is still developing, so waiting a little while to transition over is probably a good thing. I personally am starting to convert over to Quarto some of my easy websites and stuff, and it's really easy. All the stuff I'm going to show today is back compatible. Something for you to know, for those of us, well, I guess pretty much basically everyone on this call is probably in a federal agency. Quarto is a software that you download. So we will need to get permission from our IT department to add this to the allowed applications that we can install on our machines. Oh, I should also tell you briefly how Quarto is different. So R Markdown is something specific to R. It's an R package. And yeah, we could run Python code in it, but we have to add another R package to do that. And R Markdown is a great thing. It's really, really nice. And Python users don't have it. They have something called Jupyter Notebook, but it's not nearly as nice. And they don't have easy ways to create like websites and books and online books and stuff with something like R Markdown. And there are a lot more Python users out there in the world. Our studio saw this market and saw the need for creating something that acts like R Markdown, but is not language dependent. And that's what Quarto is. So it's not dependent on R. It's by itself. And so this is something that Python users can use also. And this is also why I say, yeah, eventually we're all going to be using this, because the Python world is bigger than the R world, and it's great. R Quarto is great. R Markdown's great. So they're going to be jumping on. And I think in the future, the development of sort of R Markdown kind of things is going to be stronger in the Quarto community. So we'll all end up over there. Okay, so let's go forward. Yes, definitely. And Quarto also supports Julia. So yeah, it's a better product. But like I said, if you already use R Markdown, don't worry, it's all back compatible. Quarto, think of Quarto as like R Markdown for expanded to Python and other languages. Okay, so let's talk about R Markdown for reports and what I'm going to cover today. Like I said, there are many online tutorials for R Markdown. I'm going to point you kind of in the direction if you have never been exposed to Markdown or R Markdown. And we'll kind of start from the beginning and start creating some of our own R Markdown documents in a moment. Today, I'm going to give you a brief orientation, and then we're going to work through some examples showing you how to make some tables and figures. And then I'm going to show you examples of looping over a variable, so creating multiple figures with the same format. This is something we need to do a lot, and it's something that's not covered so much within documentation that you'll find online. And then I'll talk a little bit about math and the presentations. And then part 2 tomorrow. It's not tomorrow, sorry, it's next week. So in a week, part 2, we'll be putting all these pieces together and start creating an actual report that has kind of, more of the real features that we want. And I'll show you how you're going to create a template, kind of a function that you can say, create report, and then you pass in the data So you can kind of create the same report over and over with a different data set, if that is something you need to do. Okay, so, set up for today. So for today, so that you can all follow along, I set up a RStudio Cloud project. You can just sign in with a Google account and follow along. You're not going to have to install anything. So if you want to run it locally, I have this in a repo. You can either clone it if you know how to do that, or you could download a zip file and open it up and run that. But you're also going to have to install a few things. And depending how your machine is set up, some of these things might be a little of a hassle to install. Specifically, Tiny Tech sometimes causes people trouble. But for today, we're going to use RStudio Cloud so that it's all set up for you. You don't have to worry about it. So if you go to RStudio Cloud, actually, if you're here, let me grab this link. I'll put this here. If you click on this link, you should be able to just log in the way that I'm doing it. So I'm here. It's going to look slightly different because I gave you a direct login. Something like this is going to hop up, and then you can just log in with Google. You can use any Google account. This is my work one, so using that. And you just log in. And what you're going to see is this project right here. So that link I gave you is going to take you right here, but it's going to look the same. It'll give you an option to log in with a Google account. Obviously, you can also just create an account. It's free, so don't have to worry about that. Okay. Okay, so now once you have opened this up, you're going to see this project. Let's clear this out of here. So first thing, let's just make an R Markdown document and give it a whirl. So you go File, New File. Ooh, New File, R Markdown. That gives us some options here. Document. Let's just do HTML. What the heck? We'll just go with document. Okay. Great. And now we knit it. Let's see what happens. It's going to ask us to save it. So call it delete me. So I remember to delete it. Save that. Okay. And that's it. That's how it works. So it's a R Markdown document. It's got some text in it. It has some R code that was run and output, and it has a plot. I can close this window right here, and let's take a look at just the basic structure of this thing. At the top, and within these, they're called fences, this hyphen, hyphen, hyphen. Right here, this is what's called the YAML, YAML, and it is basically the instructions about how to process this document. Specifically, it has here that the output is an HTML document. And then there's lots of other things that you can put up here. Right now, we're just going to start with something really simple and not really focus on the header information. When you look at YAML, the spacing is really important. If I do that, it won't be happy. If I think like these kind of spacings, it may be unhappy too. Like if I got rid of the space, it's really finicky. This is something when you're starting will really irritate you. You'll make a simple error and it'll complain about this, the YAML, and you can't figure it out. And often what it is you've just messed up the spacing. You know, you accidentally put a space like that. So that's always the first thing to check if you are running into problems where it says it doesn't like the header information. Okay, so we've got that header there. And then the next thing that we have are these tick, 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 which is the back tick. And you can see we have 3 here, and then we have 3 here. And then we have this curly bracket here. And the structure of this is that we have this tick, 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 it's forming a block. And then this curly bracket and R tells us that this is R code. So it knows when it's being processed, it knows, oh, okay, I need to look here and look. I know that to treat this as R code. And then you can pass in a name for this chunk. In this case, I gave it setup. You don't have to give it a name, but typically we do, so that it's helpful for sometimes to be able to reference this code chunk later. And then after that, we'll have a comma, and then we have various instructions that we pass in. In this case, it says include equals false. And what it's saying here is that I don't want this to appear in my document. So this is something I'm setting up some instructions ahead of time. In this case, it's just saying echo equals true, which is show the output of the code. Next, you have the text part, and then mark down these hashtag. This is header information. This is the second level header. A basic thing, again, remember whenever you're working with R Markdown, spacing matters. So this is a common error that people make when they start to work with R Markdown, is they'll do something like that. They put a space there. And that won't be interpreted correctly as code. You can, the nice thing when you open a R Markdown document in RStudio in the viewer like this, notice that the shading changes. You see it change? So that kind of gives you a visual hint that you've got a problem there. I think this will do the same thing. No, it didn't, but this would be a problem. A space there. Yeah, it's very finicky about spaces. Okay. Okay. So same here. If I do that, do you notice, see how it changed color? It's blue. That's interpreted as R Markdown a header. If I put a space there, it's just going to be interpreted as text. So just be aware of that whenever you're working with Markdown, that it is finicky about spaces and the leading at the beginning of things. Okay. Then these things like asterisk, asterisk, this is bolding. Then we have here, down here. So here we have our R code. This prints something. You'll, in RStudio, you can run your code like that. I can see the output. Here, I'm including the output. So that's why we saw that in the HTML. And same with plots. It'll include the plot by default, and we can run it like that. Okay, so it's kind of nice when you're working on it. You can run things and see what it's going to look like. You don't have to knit the whole thing every time. And then when we don't want that, we can get rid of it. Okay, so I think, great. Okay, so that's the real basics. And now once you so if this is your first time, you just need to learn the basic syntax. The best way, I found, easiest way is just go and look at the Markdown quick reference. So go under help. You've got two things here. You've got these cheat sheets, and you can see we've got these two R Markdown cheat sheets, but this R Markdown quick reference will get you started on the basics. So just start with that. That gets you a long ways towards all kinds of formatting that you'll need. Okay. Yeah, it's very yeah, Lewis. Yeah, it's helpful to have those right there. Would you include echo equals true in the curly brackets or in the call below that? So if I do, yeah, so in this case, I've set it up to use echo equals true by default. So it's going to include that in all my code unless I say something different. So for example, for this one, so let's go ahead and knit it. So you see I've got that output here. And I'm going to close this. And if I do echo equals false, I can not have that there. So I saved it and I just hit knit again. So so what happened, so you notice that the code is not there. The summary is not there. The output's there, but the code itself is not there. And then if I do include equals false, there's not going to be anything. So now you don't see it at all. And then is it results? This is the coding on the fly. See if I remember this correctly. Oops, no. No, of course I didn't. Yeah, there we go. Fortunately, there's a little help thing, so I didn't wait long enough. If you do it correctly, then it gives you a little help thing to show you that you've selected a tag that's actually there. I think it's hide. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So in this case, I just show the code, but I don't show the output. So you have that kind of flexibility. How do you remember all these things? You remember them by going to the cheat sheets and looking that up. And then later on, how you're going to remember them is that you'll either remember them, or if you're like me, you just go back to documents that you've created in the past and you just copy your past work. Okay. So now, yeah. Okay, good questions. Good questions. Is setup a package? It's just a name. You can leave it out. Yes, you absolutely can leave it out. Anything that is after the R, so R space and then blah blah blah, is going to be the name of something. My only tip for when you name your chunks is don't put a period in there. Don't put like set dot up. That will cause you trouble in the long run. So use something like that if you need to put a space in there. Okay. And Aria, yeah, is there a comprehensive list of everything you could put in the chunk header? Yes, there is. And I do exactly what you're doing is I Google it. And if I Google it, I come to the comprehensive documentation somewhere. I do have here. So getting help. Wait, where did I have it? Oh yeah, up at the top. So these are some resources that I use a lot. This is the well, obviously there's the R Markdown definitive guide. So that's really the documentation. That is like, as it says, the definitive guide. So that, Ariana, is that, this is where all the information is. It's in this guide. I really like this one though. So I put this here. This is a book down. Book down is a way that you can make books with R Markdown documents. So this is a so this whole book is written with R Markdown, and I really like this one. It says R Markdown for Scientists. So it has a lot of the things that you will want to do for sciencey kind of reports or manuscripts. Okay. Okay, so now we did a basic output, and I just output it to HTML. A nice thing is that we can output to other formats. And for example, the standard ones, there are many, I'm just showing you the standard ones, is PDF. So there we have a nice PDF document. And helpful for many of us is that we can also output to Word. So I'm on the cloud, so it's not quite as easy. I could download the file in the cloud, but if you were working locally on your laptop, it's just going to appear in your files, and then you can open that. So that's really nice if you need to output to Word. Okay. I'm not sure why closed captioning showed up all of a sudden. There we go. Okay. Great. Okay, so let's go on, and I want to show you some other things. And let's start talking about figures, and I want to show you how to do figures and for loops. This is a little non-intuitive, and it's something we often need to do. If you go here, I've got, we'll start off with this one, figures. So now let's start with the top, and I've added something here. You can see this looks a little different. Now I have output, and then I have on a new line, I have HTML document, and that's a tab there. Notice it's 2 spaces. I'm pretty sure it cares about how many spaces there are. And this one is 4 spaces. So now what I can do is I can give some more information about things I want to pass to this HTML document. And I can say fig caption equals yes. How do you know what all the different options are? You want to go back to this comprehensive definitive guide, and that's going to show you all those different options. Although in practice, how I do it is I know I can just look at somebody's top header information. So I find something that has the kind of output that I like, what I'm trying to do, and I look and I copy their header information. I find that fastest. Okay, so let's go here. So this is that setup. I'm going to say echo equals true. You don't have to have that. This is just if you have some features you don't want to have to keep setting, you can pass those in. So this is the chunk options. I'm going to load in some data. So I've got this R data file over in the files called landings. I'm loading that in, and let's see what it is. I can run that code, and then back down in the console here, you can do, let's see what landings is. Okay, yep, looks like a data frame. Data frame of landings for, looks like some sort of small pelagics. There we go. And now I can write some code to create a plot. This actually doesn't use the landings data. It's just a 4-panel plot, just using the base base plotting. And now this shows an example where I'm going to use, this is a more complicated example. So here I'm going to use a few packages using ggplot, reshape, and grid extra to form a grid. So I can have something really complicated. Well, this is actually not so complicated, but it's certainly more complicated than the other one. And now create something that looks like this. Okay, so let's go ahead and knit this and see what it looks like. Okay, so yep. So now you can see how that's included. In this case, I have included the code for this one, but you notice this one I didn't. And the reason is I had echo equals false in those curly brackets, and that is what kept that code, the code for the plot, from showing up. Let's see where this is the caption. This is what it looks like in HTML. I'll show you in a moment what it'll look like in the PDF. But let's look here of what's going on. So the figure caption is showing up right here, and it's fig cap equals, and there's my caption, fig align center. Okay, so that's why that's showing up there as the figure caption. A common thing that we'll do is we'll actually define the caption someplace else. So cap gets paste a 1 to 3. So, maybe we have, we have like our species defined somewhere, and now we're going to be kind of creating this caption dynamically in some other code. So we might do something like that. So we might have that code, say, in a function or somewhere up in the document. And so we can, create these captions kind of dynamically here. And then when we have our figure, we don't have to pass in text. Center fig cap, I can say here, I can just say this is cap. So it's not actually anchovy, it's just this polynomial, but you'll get the idea here. So you see now it says figure 1 anchovy. So that's how you do it if you don't know ahead of time what your caption is going to be, because you need to create that based on whatever, data is going into the figure. Okay, so let's take a look at what these captions look like within PDF. It's just the default, and you can see how they appear here by default. You'll notice one thing that is happening when you create a PDF, and that is the figures are automatically numbered. That's a nice feature of creating the PDF, because the engine behind it is something called LaTeX, and it's keeping track of that for you, which is great. And also, like, if you need to reference those figures later, there's a nice way to do that. But in the HTML, it doesn't do that for you. So this can be kind of a little bit of a hassle when you're creating HTML, because you're going to have to figure out how to automatically number your figures. I'll show you some tips on how to do that in a moment. Okay, great. Thanks. Oh, thank you, Lewis, for posting that. Great. Okay, so now let's go and see an example where we wanted to have multiple figures using the same bit of code. And we want to run this through a for loop, because they're all the same. We're just cycling over some variables. So let's go figures in a for loop. Okay, so let's take a look at this code here. What do I have? I have a for loop from 1 to 2, and I am plotting this data frame. And this data frame is basically I'm plotting the same thing. I'm plotting t versus y from this data frame twice. I can do here I did it with base R, and then here I show how to do this with ggplot2. And I wanted to show the ggplot2 example because when you are putting a ggplot in a for loop and putting in an R Markdown document, you need to set it up like this. So you're going to output the ggplot output to a variable. In this case, I just set it to P, and then you need to do print P. If you don't know that you need to do this, you could spend hours tearing your hair out, not understanding why you can't just have it like that. Well, why doesn't show up? You know, the base does, but ggplot doesn't. That's just an annoying feature of using ggplot within R Markdown. Okay, so let's run this, and we're just going to look through the top two and see what happens. Oh, no, sorry, I didn't want to do it that way. I want to go to HTML. Let's do HTML. Okay, so let's check out the HTML. Okay, so don't know why I had ggplot2 here. I didn't need ggplot2 for this bit of code. This is just base R. So what you see is we have two figures here, and they're just kind of one after another, like that. And then with ggplot2, we have one after another. Okay, so okay, well that's nice. At least we got two figures coming out, you know, from a for loop. That's nice, but what about if we want figure captions with these, and we want the figure captions to change because let's say these are, you know, different data. Okay, so in this case, I am, well, I don't know why these look the same. Oh, these are random numbers. So these are actually different plots that different data that I'm plotting because I used a random number generator. So let's see how we can have the figure caption change. So this is, I think, kind of weird in R Markdown, but the way that you do this is that you pass in a vector of your figure captions. So let's look at right here. We have this fig cap, paste figure 1 to 2. Let's see what that is. Let's just run that here in the console. So you see this is a vector of length 2, and it has two figure captions, figure 1 and figure 2. So I think this should work too. Let's see. Yeah, okay. So like, you know, what if, you know, this figure caption, you want it to be, you know, figure 1, figure 2, and you want it to be for two different species. So you might do something like this. I'm going to be able to spell mackerel. Some there. Okay. So you might do something that looks, oh, wow. Didn't want that to happen. So you might create it like this. And again, as I showed before, like you wouldn't necessarily put, you know, something really long like this up in the curly brackets. I would probably want to do something like this, personally, just to keep it a little cleaner. I'd make my captions separately because this is long. Otherwise, I'm going to get lost in keeping track of everything. So I'm going to do that. So now I'm going to set this up. and we can see what that output looks like. So here we have our two figures, and now when I run this, okay, I gotta get my two figures. You don't see the captions, but let's go ahead and knit it. And now when we go down here, we see the captions show up, this one, and now we have that one. Okay. You can also have your figures be side by side. Here I show this example. This one is a little bit more finicky in terms of getting your captions to show up. And in this case, for this example, I did something actually quite hacky, in that I just cat a caption like this. So if you if you use this trick here and you put the figure cap in here like this, put this vector in, it wouldn't work for this case where you had them side by side like that. There may be other ways to get around that though. Okay, can you put R objects so they auto-populate? Yes, you can, yeah, absolutely. Definitely you can put R objects in there, and that's what I'm doing here. I put cap is an R object, but I could write a function. Yeah, anything, it's going to run this. This is basically R code over here that's being run, and whatever you put there will work. So for example, I bet if, let's see, if I did like letters 1 to 2, so that's a bit of R code right there. What is that? We can run that down. See, it's an A and a B. And if I say, yeah, it's saved. Good. And now if I knit that, you can see that now it's B and A. So any R function that is going to output a vector of strings is going to work. Okay, great. Okay, so let's move on to tables. So how do we do tables in R Markdown? Okay, so let's go on to the help, and I'll show you how we don't do it. So if you go on to the quick reference over here, and you roll down here and you see tables like that, that's kind of like you hand do it. Yeah, that's not what you do. Like I mean, I very rarely use that, like only for like even, yeah, like there's only special circumstances when I'm doing that. Like I guess I do that when like I'm creating a website and so let me go here. I'll show you this one. So this table right here, I created like that. But even then, and when I create it, it's kind of a hassle to create them. So if you do Markdown table online generation, Google that, you'll find these nice little widgets where you can put all the information, and then it'll just generate your code for doing something like this. So if you find yourself needing to do that, these online generation tools will really save you. But okay, so if we don't normally do that, I mean, just think, this would be a nightmare for a big table. So we don't want to do that. So instead, what we do is we use something called cable. It's a function that's going to make nice, pretty tables. And then often we're using an additional package called cable extra. So first, let me just knit this and show you what it's going to look like. Okay. And this, again, same thing, is going to output to PDF and also output to Word for you. For the Word, it's not quite so pretty. If you needed to use Word, you're going to use, well, we use something called Flex Table, which is nicer output to Word. But same idea. So here's the output for cable. So you can see here, there's our generic table. And what's the data going in? It's basically a data frame. In this case, I'm using the MT cars, and I'm using the first 5 lines and first 6 columns, and it just makes a nice table for me. This is just the default table. I pass in the data frame, and then I tell it what kind of alignment I want. So I want this column over on the left, and I want the other ones in the center. So the thing with that is cable gives you this nice default, but often we want to spruce things up a bit, have a little more control. So cable extra is the package that we use for that. And so this is the kind of how it works, is that you will use this function to create a cable object, and then you apply this next function, which is cable styling. And then you can style it. And with this, we can do some really nice things. So for example, I've taken this table and I've floated it over to the right, and I've given it this striped look to it. You can see just like this. And you can kind of go nuts with the styling on this. Spend a inordinate amount of time styling your tables. I have spent way too much time on this, styling tables, but just the kind of default things you can get out of Cable Extra work great. Cable Extra has good documentation online. Just search for that. Okay, great. So that's how we're going to do our tables. What about when we want to do tables in a for loop? Let's see how that works. Show you the tricks for getting that to work here. Okay, so tables in a for loop. So this is an example where we need to make the same table over and over again with different data. So the trick here is to get the output from that cable function, output it to an object, and then print that. And also notice this thing results as is. So what's going on with results as is that what cable is outputting, let me actually go here. I'll show you what cable outputs. Let's just run this. I'm going to run that. And I'm going to run this. This up a little bit. Okay, here we go. Right. Okay. So you see that it has outputted HTML in this case. And what this is doing, the results as is saying, hey, it's going to output HTML, and I want you to include that as HTML and not try to interpret that output for me. Okay, so that's what that's doing. And so what you do is you output this to this, and then you print it. Then once you do that, then we can put all this in a for loop. So let's take a look at this. First, let's just look at the output. HTML document. Okay, great. So what am I doing here? So I have, I'm going over 1 to table number. So these are the species within this data set. I'm looking at the iris data set. And iris is sepal length and petal length for different species of irises. There's a whole bunch of them in here. And what I want to do is I want to create this table for each species. So I am doing, here's my cable call. I am subsetting the iris data frame, and I want to do the species that equals this. Here's my list of species here, and I want to go through and use the first 4 rows. Oh, sorry. Let me go back and describe what's going on here. Here's the subset command here. That's right there. So what that is doing is it's saying the iris data frame, and I want the species equal to species number table. And table is going from 1 to however many species there are. Okay, so it's for looping over that. And then the next, I'm going to take that data frame, and I'm just going to show the first 4 rows. The caption, oops, you need to pass the caption into the cable function. So I've defined the caption here, and I'm just saying the table, table number, and then the species. So that's what you see here. Table 1, species, table 2, species, table 3, species. So there are 3 species in this. Okay, so a question about exporting to PDF. So cable and cable extra work quite nicely for PDF. I don't know about Flex Table. Flex Table probably works great. Maybe others can chime in of what they use for PDF. I just use I actually use Xtable for my PDF, but that may be specific to me because I come from a LaTeX background. So Xtable was created by people who do LaTeX, so it's all familiar to me. It might be really unpleasant if you weren't coming from that background. Flex Table is nice. So I would definitely look into that. Definitely, if you are working with Word documents, you need Flex Table because Cable and Cable Extra do not produce nice Word tables. Okay. Great. So yeah, Josh, thanks, Josh. Great. Okay, so let me hop back on here, the last one. I want to show you briefly some presentation examples. And let's start off with a little demo, and I'm going to show you this type of presentation, and then I'll show you how you can produce a basic version of this. So first I'm going to just demo a branded one. This is an example of a presentation created with R Markdown and using that package, which I'm not going to try to say. It's a very common package for presentations using R Markdown. And you can see, it can produce these nice little presentations. Let's go back. Here's another example of things you can do, a little bit different style. You can see this style has these kind of sidebars over here. Anyhow, you have a lot of different flexibility with these packages. These 2 GitHub repositories show you how to create this type of like branded presentation. Okay, so now after you've seen the branded one, I'm going to just show you the default one that you can create. So you go into File as usual, New, R Markdown, and now you're going to have some templates. Oh, actually, I don't know what templates are there. We'll go there. Okay, so the one that they have is IO slides. I don't think, yeah, no, I did not surprised I didn't install that. Okay. So the default that they show you here is IO slides, and let's just see what that looks like. They also have Slidey, Beamer, and you could do PowerPoint. So there's our slide. Now I'm gonna save it, delete me 2. Okay, and then we go ahead and knit this, and now you can see it's going to give us some other options here too. And there we go. So with this, we could go here, and we've created this. This is this presentation, and you could see you could very quickly make a sort of default, or not default, but just a simple presentation using this. You just hop in and you start editing this, and you know, these are the different slides. This is how you mark it. Each one is going to have, each of these formats is going to have a little bit different structure of how you specify different slides. So you kind of have to learn that. Let me show you this one here. Oh, yes, that is correct. So that'll install. This package is really common for using for creating presentations, just because it gives you a lot more flexibility. You can make things a bit prettier. To show you, it's just kind of the default one that I created. You can see it. It looks like I didn't really put the really nifty things in, but the nice thing about this, you have these different, like, it's really easy to do like different columns and stuff using this, and you can do these kind of black slides like this really easily. That's pretty nice. But there's a lot of different options for doing presentations. Pick your favorite. I will say that personally, I'm not very good at doing presentations on R Markdown, and I actually spend way more time futzing with formatting with R Markdown presentations than probably I need to. Often I find that just going on to Google Slides is better for me personally. But some people are really whizzes at it. And what I have found is helpful is I'll find somebody's presentation, and once you're used to the formats, you'll recognize that it's created with Markdown, with R Markdown. So, and often they'll send you a link to the repository where you can view their presentation, and then you can just grab their Markdown file and then put in your own content, and it'll have all the nifty little features that they've incorporated into their presentation. Okie dokie. Yes, Diana. So yes, they let's go here. So here are 2 repositories that have been created. This one is by Fish Tools. So Christine Stawitz prepared this one. And so just hop in there. If you look in here, you're going to see the different templates here. And this theme is what's setting things up. And then we have some static images. I took Christine's work and just added some more different examples, a few more figures, so we could have, you know, different templates. And I used the NOAA fisheries templates that kind of our media office has produced. So I just created a few more options here, a few more some more info in the style sheet also. So start from there. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, and I want to leave you with links here. And these are real reports that are based on R Markdown. Some of them have some GitHub repositories where you can start poking around. Next week, then I am going to show you how to put together these little sort of Lego pieces that I talked about today and say, okay, now how do we start creating an actual report? Once we've got a few different R Markdown pages, how do we start putting that all together? All right, so let's see. I am going to open it up for questions now. So go ahead, you can either unmute yourself or throw questions into chat. So Molly, another thing that I didn't show here is or something that I use a lot is I'll create a function to create my figures, and then I am going to use that function in different places. So I do use looping sometimes, but I use the function for creating either my table or my figures constantly. I always do that. Can you explain setting working directories within and across code chunks? Yes. So, okay, so Paul, I'm guessing that you're thinking of a situation where you need to find maybe some data that's in a folder or an image. Yeah, okay. So what you want to learn is the here package. So you don't want to hard code in directories in general. Yeah, no, you don't want to hard code that in. You want to always have it sort of relative to where you are. So let me how do I show you that? Okay. Yeah, think of an example. Okay, so here I'm in so I'm in this folder right here. So when I run this, it's all going to be relative to this folder. So, oops. No. Sorry, go back to the HTML here. Okay. So what I mean by relative to this folder means that it can find salmon here, but so if I just say load salmon.r data, it's going to find that, but it's not going to be able to find, say, landings, which are this R data. So I would need to tell it how to find that. And the way that, so I would do that is, do I have the here package installed? Install here, yeah. So library here. Yep. Okay, so what here does is that it's going to define this thing called here, which defines your home. And so you always know what home is, no matter what machine you're on. If you specify that the file is, you know, if I say file path here, comma, images, you see I go to the images folder. So I can always find that, and I know the real path to that. And it doesn't matter what machine that I'm on. So if I'm giving you, Paul, some code, and I want you to be able to find this image, and I need to give the complete path to that thing, I do it like this, file path here, and it will be able to find that because it's defined here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that it here is yeah, how is it? Yeah, it's sort of your, it's based on your current working directory. And so the thing here is that you don't need to be moving your working directory around. And you can get lost if you do that. So by using these file path here, you set your working directory is at the base of the project. So here, this is my project. So this is always going to be my working directory. And I'm never doing something where I change my working directory someplace else. I just, so like if I needed to direct output somewhere, I would direct the stop doing that. I would direct the output to something that says something like file path here, output, something like that. I don't know if that gets to what you were asking, Paul. You can unmute if I didn't. Yeah, now Ariana makes a good point for the projects. Yeah, the relative path names are going to work well, but keep in mind that this I find confusing. So once the relative path name is relative to the folder that you're in. So here, this is what I was saying where it'll find salmon. Let's look at this code here. Let's get rid of this. Okay. So where am I loading that salmon? Child table 1. Okay. Anyhow, let's just do this. Load salmon.r data. Okay. This should work. All right. Okay, so that worked. That didn't complain. Now let's do load landings. Oh, this should complain. Yeah, error. You see, it didn't find it. So that's what I meant, that when you're running the R Markdown, all those links are relative to the folder where the R Markdown file is. And this is where using here is really going to save you. And why is that? Well, imagine that you moved this, our Markdown file, someplace else. So what if I had done this? Okay, so I do that. So it's ... go up one and find landings. So now let's run it. Hey, yay, that ran. Super. Okay, now let's create a new folder. And get this over here. Copy to test. Oh, come on. not what I wanted you to do. Okay. So now I've got this thing called test that's in here. So there we go. All I want in here is this code. Yeah. So here's that code, right? And this code worked just fine before. And now let's try it. Ah, I get an error. It didn't work. Because now it's looking, everything is relative to this new folder. So like if I was moving this thing around, it would be really easy for me to break all my links and just creates a nightmare. You know, why did it start working? All I did was, you know, moved it someplace. So that's why like doing something like this. So if you always use here, and you're saying find things relative to the base directory. I mean, obviously, if I move landings around, that, you know, that's going to break. But at least now, if I don't move this, I can move test around, and this is still going to work. So here, so now it's going to work. Oh, well, it would be helpful if I did that. Okay. So there we go. So now that works, and now let's move this. So move this out of here. Move. Let's move here. Okay. So now I've moved it over here, and let's see if it works. And it still works. So that just shows you an example how using file path and using here can create more robust links to locations. All right. Any other questions? As I said, feel free to unmute if you want to. Just have a few people on the line now. One of the things I'm going to show next week too that I think is kind of non-intuitive also is using R Markdown templates. So doing a for loop over an R Markdown template. So you're going to create a whole report over and over again. I'll show you an example of something like this. So this is the Atlantic offshore wind development. Unfortunately, you can't see the R Markdown that created this, but if you look at these, you can see, you know, here's a bunch of different sites, and if you look at these, they've got these kind of standard reports. You can see it's kind of the same information, but it's just different. These are different wind regions. So this is a use case where a template R Markdown report works really well. So you create this template R Markdown, and then you're just going to pass in some data. It's probably a data file of some sort that has the site specific information. So the information that you're going to need to create this here, the information that you need to that's going to, you know, the data frame that goes into here, or it's a data call. I think this uses a database think is what I was told. So, you know, you're making a call to the database, but you need to know, like, you know, what's the location so that you can generate this file here, that sort of thing. So I'll show you how to use templates next week. And I'll also go through this example here that I kind of opened up, which is a report with tables. You can see kind of, I think I've got this. Yeah, no, it's not that one. Never mind. Anyhow, I'll go through an example where we generate a basic kind of semi-full featured report. All right, so if there are no more questions, I am going to turn this off.